The precision of these hiding places and the sophistication of the concealment methods suggest that the Templars possessed capabilities that exceeded anything conventionally attributed to medieval technology. They created caches that remained undetected for centuries, encoding their locations using systems that combined astronomical knowledge, geometric principles, and symbolic languages that could preserve information across generations of suppression. As you stand in this quiet village today, surrounded by hills that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, you can feel the weight of hidden history pressing down like morning mist. Every stone, every rune, every carefully placed landmark tells part of a story that began in the Holy Land and culminated in these French hills where knowledge too dangerous for its time was preserved for an era when humanity might be wise enough to receive it. The mysteries of Rennes-le-Château aren't just about gold or jewels or ancient artifacts. They're about the preservation of human potential itself, carefully guarded across centuries until the moment when it could safely be revealed. That moment may be closer than anyone imagines, and the revelation may transform our understanding of both history and human capabilities in ways that medieval minds could barely comprehend. Picture yourself standing in the misty hills of southern France, where ancient stones whisper secrets that have driven men to madness and death. This isn't just any village. This is Rennes-le-Château, a place so small you could walk through it in 10 minutes, yet so mysterious that treasure hunters have spent their entire lives trying to unlock its secrets. What if everything you thought you knew about the Knights Templars' lost treasure was wrong? What if their greatest hoard wasn't buried in some distant cave or sunken ship, but hidden in plain sight in a French countryside so ordinary that thousands of tourists drive past it every year without a second glance? You're about to discover why this sleepy village of barely 300 souls has become the epicenter of one of history's most enduring mysteries. Why conspiracy theorists, archaeologists, and occultists have flocked here for over a century, and why the Catholic Church might have very good reasons to keep its secrets buried forever. The story begins with a question that has haunted researchers for generations. How does a village priest in one of the poorest regions of France suddenly acquire enough wealth to live like a king? But before we dive into that modern mystery, you need to understand why this particular hill has been important for over 2,000 years. In ancient times, this strategic peak was crowned by Rede, a Celtic oppidum that controlled vital trade routes between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. The Romans recognized its importance, building upon these foundations to create a fortified settlement that guarded the mountain passes. Under Roman rule, gold flowed through these valleys like water, funding legions and building empires. The collapse of Rome brought new players to this stage. The Visigoths made Rede one of their royal capitals, their treasure-filled palaces, reflecting wealth that had accumulated from across their vast territories. When their kingdom fell to the Franks in the 8th century, that treasure simply vanished. Local legends claim it was hidden in caves and crypts throughout the region, waiting for the true heirs to return, but it was the medieval period that brought the most mysterious chapter to this hill's long history. The Cathars, those dualistic Christians whom the Catholic Church branded as dangerous heretics, had strongholds throughout this region. They possessed libraries filled with texts that challenged Orthodox Christianity, wealth accumulated through their sophisticated merchant networks, and most dangerously, knowledge that the Church could not tolerate. When the Albigensian Crusade crushed the Cathar movement in the 13th century, their treasures and sacred texts didn't fall into Church hands, as expected. Instead, they disappeared completely, as if the earth itself had swallowed them. The Inquisition tortured thousands trying to locate these hidden caches, but the Cathars had learned well from earlier persecutions. Their secrets remained buried. At the heart of this historical tapestry stands the village church dedicated to Mary Magdalene. This choice of patron saint wasn't random. It connects directly to the most powerful military order of medieval Europe, the Knights Templar. The Templars held particular reverence for Mary Magdalene, seeing her as a keeper of hidden wisdom that Orthodox Christianity had deliberately suppressed. The Templars arrived in this region within decades of their founding in 1119, establishing a network of commanderies that controlled trade routes and accumulated vast wealth. But unlike their militant activities in the Holy Land, their operations in southern France were focused on something far more mysterious: the preservation and protection of knowledge and artifacts that they had discovered in the ruins beneath. Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. Archaeological evidence scattered throughout the landscape around Rennes-Château tells the story of extensive Templar activity. Medieval ruins dot the hillsides, including watchtowers and fortifications that match Templar architectural styles. Stone markers bearing carved crosses and geometric symbols appear throughout the surrounding valleys, many oriented according to principles of sacred geometry that the Templars incorporated into their most important sites. The village church itself holds clues that have puzzled researchers for generations. Built in the 11th century on foundations that may date back to Visigothic times, it incorporates architectural elements that seem deliberately designed to encode hidden meanings. The entrance is flanked by ancient columns salvaged from earlier structures. The altar's positioning follows astronomical alignments that have no obvious liturgical purpose. Strange carvings appear in unexpected places, depicting symbols that belong more to Hermetic tradition than Orthodox Christianity. But the most intriguing aspect of the church's design is how it serves as a reference point for a vast network of similar sites throughout the region. From the church tower, you can see dozens of other religious buildings, ruins and landmarks that seem to be positioned according to a master plan that spans hundreds of square kilometers. This geometric precision suggests coordination on a scale that would have required resources and authority far beyond what any local organization could have commanded. The Templars weren't just wealthy warriors. They were also sophisticated scholars who had gained access to advanced knowledge during their time in the Holy Land. Their libraries contained texts in multiple languages. Their workshops produced innovations in engineering and metallurgy, and their astronomical observations showed understanding of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries. When the Templar order was suppressed in 1307, much of their accumulated wealth and knowledge simply vanished. Unlike other religious orders whose assets were inventoried and redistributed, the Templars seemed to have anticipated their persecution and taken measures to protect their most valuable possessions. King Philip IV of France, who orchestrated their destruction largely to cancel his enormous debts to the order, found far less treasure than he had expected in their commanderies. Local traditions Around Rennes-le-Château preserve memories of those final days when Templars throughout the region worked frantically to hide their treasures before the king's agents could seize them. Folk songs passed down through generations describe knights in white mantles conducting midnight ceremonies in hidden chambers, consecrating objects of power before placing them in their eternal resting places. These weren't just stories invented by romantic imaginations. They contain specific details about locations, procedures, and symbols that suggest basis in actual historical events. Most intriguingly, these oral traditions specify that the treasures were hidden not just for safekeeping, but according to prophecies that foretold their eventual discovery by those worthy to receive them. You're walking through the cramped presbytery of Rennes-le-Château in 1885, where candlelight flickers across walls that haven't seen renovation in decades. The man living here should be struggling to keep his church roof from leaking and his parishioners from abandoning their faith altogether. Instead, you're about to witness the beginning of one of history's most extraordinary transformations. Father Berenger Saunière arrived in this forgotten village with nothing but his theological education and a meager salary that barely covered the cost of bread. At 33, he was young for a parish priest, ambitious perhaps, but trapped in an assignment that offered no prospects for advancement. The Bishop of Carcassonne had sent him here not as a reward, but as a reminder to keep his political opinions to himself. The village itself was dying. Fewer than 300 residents scratched out a living from rocky soil that yielded more stones than crops. The church was a crumbling relic, its medieval stones held together more by habit than mortar. The roof leaked so badly that Saunière had to move the altar to avoid puddles during Sunday Mass. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, where a priest could live his entire career without making a ripple in the wider world. But something about this assignment intrigued rather than depressed the young priest. Unlike his predecessors who had focused solely on pastoral duties, Saunière began exploring the village's history with the curiosity of a scholar. He spent hours examining the ancient stones of his church, noting architectural details that seemed inconsistent with conventional medieval construction. He walked the surrounding hills, mapping the locations of ruins and artifacts that locals had ignored for generations. His first discovery was subtle but significant. While cleaning debris from the church basement in 1886, he found fragments of carved stone that clearly predated the current building. The symbols carved into these fragments weren't standard Christian iconography, but something far older and more mysterious. When he showed these carvings to visiting scholars, their reactions convinced him that he had stumbled onto something historically significant. Encouraged by these findings, Saunière began a systematic investigation of his church's foundations. Working alone during the pre-dawn hours when villagers wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions, he excavated carefully around the altar area. Medieval churches were often built on sites of earlier religious significance, and he suspected that his building concealed evidence of much older sacred activity. His patience was rewarded in the winter of 1890 when his excavations revealed an entrance to chambers that had been sealed for centuries. The passages he discovered weren't simple storage areas but sophisticated underground rooms that showed evidence of having been used for purposes he couldn't immediately identify. The walls bore traces of smoke from oil lamps, the floors showed wear patterns from regular use, and most intriguingly, hidden alcoves contained objects that had been carefully placed and preserved. These initial discoveries were just the beginning. As Saunier gained access to more of the underground complex, he realized that he had uncovered something far more significant than a few interesting artifacts. The chambers formed an extensive network that connected to natural cave systems. Throughout the surrounding hills, medieval engineers had modified these natural formations, creating secure storage areas and workshop spaces that could remain hidden from any surface investigation. The most remarkable discovery came in the spring of 1891, when Saunier located what appeared to be a library chamber. Unlike the other rooms, this space had been designed specifically for preserving documents and books. Climate control systems using principles of airflow and moisture management kept the interior remarkably dry despite the humid underground environment. Stone shelves held containers that had protected their contents from decay for centuries. Inside these containers, Saunier found documents that challenged everything he thought he knew about medieval history and the origins of his church. The collection included texts written in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and languages he couldn't identify. Some appeared to be copies of ancient works that were supposed to have been lost during various historical catastrophes. Others were clearly original, compositions that described events and knowledge systems that didn't appear in any official historical records. But the most shocking discoveries were the technical documents. The underground chambers contained detailed plans and instructions for engineering projects, astronomical observations, and what could only be described as scientific experiments. The level of knowledge displayed in these materials far exceeded anything that mainstream history attributed to medieval scholars. These weren't just religious texts or historical chronicles. They were technical manuals created by people who possessed sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy. The transformation in Saunier's lifestyle began almost immediately after these discoveries. By the summer of 1891, less than a year after finding the underground archive, he had begun commissioning expensive renovations to his church. The scope and quality of these projects far exceeded anything that could be funded by normal parish income or reasonable ecclesiastical support. Local residents watched in amazement as their humble priest transformed the church interior with decorations that would have been impressive in a cathedral. New statues, stained glass windows, and carved stonework appeared regularly, each piece crafted by artisans whose skills commanded premium prices. The bills for these projects, when anyone dared ask about them, were always paid promptly and in cash. More puzzling still was the change in Saunier himself. The priest, who had arrived as a simple country clergyman, began displaying knowledge and cultural sophistication that seemed impossible given his background and resources. His sermons incorporated references to historical events and philosophical concepts that suggested extensive study in areas far removed from basic theology. His conversation revealed familiarity with languages and scholarly traditions that he had never formally studied. By 1893, Saunier's wealth had become too obvious to ignore. He had begun construction of projects that rivaled those of wealthy aristocrats. A magnificent personal residence called Villa Bethania, an elaborate library tower known as Tour Magdala, and gardens that incorporated exotic plants and sophisticated landscaping. Local estimates of his expenditures during this period exceeded the lifetime earnings of most bishops. The source of this sudden wealth became the subject of intense speculation throughout the region. Church authorities launched investigations that found no evidence of fraud or improper financial dealings. Civil authorities examined his tax records and banking transactions, but discovered no irregularities that could explain his prosperity. The money appeared to be legitimate, but its source remained completely opaque. Saunier's responses to these investigations were masterfully evasive. When questioned about his finances, he provided vague explanations about donations from wealthy benefactors who preferred to remain anonymous. When pressed for specifics, he claimed protection under various ecclesiastical privileges that prevented him from revealing certain information. His answers were always technically correct, but never actually explained anything. More intriguingly, the priest began receiving visitors whose identities and purposes remained mysterious. Elegant carriages arrived regularly, carrying passengers, who stayed briefly and departed without explanation. Correspondence arrived from addresses throughout Europe, written in languages that local postal workers couldn't identify. These connections suggested networks that extended far beyond anything a rural priest should have been able to access. The most dramatic changes appeared in the church itself. Saunier's renovations included decorative elements that departed significantly from standard Catholic iconography. A statue of the demon Asmodeus was positioned prominently at the entrance, bearing an inscription that read, "By this sign you will conquer." Biblical scenes were depicted in ways that subtly contradicted orthodox interpretations. Hidden symbols appeared throughout the interior, creating a visual language that only informed observers could decipher. These modifications weren't random artistic choices. They reflected specific knowledge that Saunier had gained from his discoveries. The underground archive had revealed that his church occupied a site of extraordinary historical significance, connected to traditions and events that extended far beyond conventional religious history. The decorative program he implemented was designed to preserve and communicate this hidden knowledge to those capable of understanding its implications. By 1895, Saunier had effectively transformed Rennes-le-Château from a forgotten backwater into something resembling a medieval lord's estate. His lifestyle reflected wealth and sophistication that placed him among the most prosperous individuals in the region. Yet he maintained his pastoral duties with apparent sincerity, providing spiritual guidance to his parishioners while pursuing interests that extended far beyond conventional religious concerns. The mystery of his transformation deepened as years passed, without any reasonable explanation for his continued prosperity. Investigations by church and civil authorities found no evidence of criminal activity, but also no plausible legitimate source for his wealth. He seemed to have discovered something that generated income through mechanisms that operated beyond normal understanding. Local residents developed their own theories about their enigmatic priest. Some believed he had found ancient treasure hidden by earlier inhabitants of the region. Others suspected supernatural intervention, whether divine or demonic. A few recognized the situation for what it most likely was, evidence that Saunier had gained access to knowledge and resources that were deliberately concealed from public view. The transformation of Berenger Saunier, from impoverished village priest to wealthy sophisticate, represents one of history's most compelling mysteries. Whatever he discovered in those underground chambers, it provided him with capabilities and resources that transcended normal limitations. The implications of his story continue to challenge our understanding of what was possible in the medieval world and what secrets might still be waiting for discovery by those brave enough to seek them. You're holding documents that shouldn't exist, written in languages that medieval scholars weren't supposed to know, describing events that official history claims never happened. These are the texts that Saunier discovered in his underground archive, and they tell a story that connects his village directly to the most powerful and mysterious military order of the medieval world. The connection between Rennes-le-Château and the Knights Templar isn't speculation or romantic fantasy. It's documented in the very papers that transformed Saunier's life, written by the Templars themselves in the final decades before their destruction. These documents reveal that the hill where the village sits wasn't just another strategic location in their vast network of holdings. It was one of their most important secret repositories. The story begins in 1118, when 9 knights arrived in Jerusalem claiming to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. But the documents in Saunier's archive revealed that this public mission was cover for something far more significant. The knights had come to retrieve specific objects and knowledge that had been hidden beneath the Temple Mount during the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. What they found in those excavations beneath Solomon's Temple changed everything. The archive contains copies of their expedition reports, written in a mixture of Latin, Greek, and coded symbols. These accounts describe the discovery of chambers that contained not just treasure, but artifacts and documents that proved human. Civilization had achieved levels of knowledge and capability that mainstream history refused to acknowledge. The most significant find was a collection of texts that described advanced understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and what the Templars called the hidden sciences of consciousness. These weren't theoretical works, but practical manuals that provided detailed instructions for achieving capabilities that would appear supernatural to medieval observers. The knowledge came from sources that predated known civilizations, suggesting contact with intelligences far more advanced than anything documented in conventional history. By 1150, the Templars had begun implementing a systematic plan to preserve this dangerous knowledge in secure locations throughout Europe. The documents revealed that they weren't just creating treasure caches. They were establishing a network of preservation sites designed to maintain the information across centuries of potential persecution. Rennes-le-Château was selected as one of the primary nodes in this network. The choice of location wasn't random. The hill's geological structure included natural cave systems that could be modified to create climate-controlled storage environments. Its position provided visual communication with other Templar sites throughout the Languedoc region. Most importantly, local traditions suggested that the site had been considered sacred since pre-Christian times, indicating that earlier guardians had recognized its special properties. Construction of the preservation facility began around 1160. Using techniques that combined conventional medieval engineering with methods derived from the ancient texts they had discovered in Jerusalem. The underground complex they created was far more sophisticated than anything normally attributed to medieval builders. Climate control systems maintained stable temperature and humidity. Defensive features could seal the chambers completely if necessary. Most remarkably, the entire facility was designed according to geometric principles that encoded astronomical and mathematical information into its very structure. The documents describe the care taken to preserve not just written materials, but also artifacts whose significance wasn't fully understood even by the Templars themselves. Some objects displayed properties that defied medieval understanding of natural law. Others seemed to respond to human consciousness in ways that suggested technologies based on principles that wouldn't be formally recognized for centuries. By the 1170s, the Rennes-le-Château facility had become a center for research as well as preservation. Selected Templars were trained in techniques described in the ancient texts, developing capabilities that gave their order enormous advantages in warfare, finance, and politics. These abilities weren't supernatural powers, but practical applications of understanding about consciousness and reality that mainstream medieval thought couldn't accommodate. The archive contains detailed accounts of experiments conducted at the site. Some focused on what would now be called consciousness enhancement, techniques for expanding awareness, improving pattern recognition, and accessing information through non-physical means. Others involved the study of artifacts that demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond medieval norms. Still others explored the application of ancient mathematical and astronomical knowledge to practical problems of engineering and navigation. These research activities weren't conducted in isolation. The documents reveal a network of scholars and initiates throughout Europe who were working to understand and apply the knowledge preserved in various Templar facilities. This network included not just members of the order, but also carefully selected outsiders who had demonstrated both competence and discretion. The goal was to gradually reintroduce advanced capabilities into human civilization without triggering the kind of suppression that had eliminated previous guardians of such knowledge. The success of this program can be seen in the rapid expansion of Templar influence throughout the 12th and 13th centuries. Their financial innovations, military effectiveness, and political sophistication reflected access to knowledge and capabilities that their contemporaries couldn't match. They became the first truly international organization, operating according to principles that wouldn't be formally understood until much later periods. But this success also made them increasingly dangerous to existing power structures. The documents contain increasingly urgent warnings about the growing suspicion of church and royal authorities. By the 1280s, Templar leaders recognized that their order was likely to face systematic persecution. They began implementing contingency plans that had been developed decades earlier for exactly this scenario. The preservation of knowledge became an urgent priority. The most important materials at Rennes-le-Château and other sites were copied and distributed to secure locations that could remain hidden even if the main facilities were discovered. Techniques were developed for encoding crucial information into architectural features, landscape modifications, and symbolic systems that could preserve essential knowledge, even if all written records were destroyed. The final phase of Templar Activity at Rennes-le-Château began in 1305, 2 years before the mass arrests that would destroy the order. Working with desperate urgency, teams of knights consolidated the most important materials and prepared the facility for a closure that might last centuries. The documents describe elaborate rituals conducted to consecrate the sealed chambers, ensuring that the preserved knowledge would remain protected until worthy successors could claim it. These final preparations included the creation of what the documents call keys of awakening, encoded instructions that would allow future discoverers to access and understand the preserved materials. These keys were embedded in multiple forms: written documents hidden in various locations, symbols carved into permanent architectural features, and oral traditions passed down through networks of families and organizations that had remained loyal to the Templar mission. The church at Rennes-le-Château played a crucial role in this preservation system. Its dedication to Mary Magdalene wasn't just religious preference, but coded reference to the hidden feminine wisdom, traditions that the Templars had encountered in their research. The building's architectural features incorporated geometric relationships that served as reference points for interpreting the broader landscape encoding. Most importantly, its position as a religious site provided protection and continuity that could survive political upheavals. When the persecution finally came in 1307, the Rennes-le-Château facility was already sealed and hidden. The knights who had prepared it were arrested and executed, but they died knowing that their most important work would survive. The knowledge and artifacts they had spent decades preserving remained safe beneath the village, waiting for the prophesied time when humanity would be ready to reclaim its hidden heritage. The documents in Saunier's archive reveal that this waiting period wasn't meant to be indefinite. The Templars had calculated astronomical cycles and social development patterns that suggested optimal timing for the knowledge to be revealed. Their predictions pointed to the late 19th century as a period when human technological and spiritual evolution would reach levels necessary for safely implementing the preserved capabilities. Saunier's discovery in 1891 occurred precisely within this predicted time frame. His transformation from humble priest to wealthy sophisticate demonstrated the continued effectiveness of techniques that had been developed 7 centuries earlier. The knowledge that changed his life was the same that had made the Templars the most powerful organization in medieval Europe. The Templar connection to Rennes-le-Château isn't just historical curiosity. It's proof that human civilization has repeatedly achieved capabilities that were subsequently lost or suppressed. The preservation system they created represents one of history's most successful long-term knowledge conservation projects, and the gradual revelation of their secrets may signal the beginning of humanity's next great leap forward. You're in Saunier's private study, examining documents that should have crumbled to dust centuries ago, yet remain as readable as if they were written yesterday. These aren't just any medieval texts. They are the actual treasure map of the Knights Templar, encoded with secrets that explain not only Saunier's sudden wealth, but the true scope of what the Templars discovered beneath Jerusalem. The 4 parchments that Saunier found in his underground archive in 1891 appeared at first glance to be routine medieval documents. 2 were written in Latin and appeared to be genealogical records tracing noble bloodlines back to the Merovingian dynasty. The other two seemed to be religious texts, a version of the Gospel of John and a copy of the Liber Historia Francorum. Any reasonable scholar would have catalogued them as moderately interesting historical documents and moved on. But Saunier wasn't just any scholar. His months of studying the technical documents in the underground library had taught him to recognize the sophisticated encoding systems that medieval initiates used to hide dangerous knowledge. The irregular spacing of letters, the unusual abbreviations, and the seemingly random capital letters throughout the texts weren't scribal errors. They were components of an elaborate cipher system. Working by candlelight in the pre-dawn hours, Saunier began the painstaking process of decoding these documents. The techniques required knowledge of multiple languages, astronomical calculations, and mathematical principles that most medieval scholars wouldn't have possessed. Fortunately, the technical manuals he had discovered provided detailed instructions for exactly these types of cryptographic challenges. The first breakthrough came when he realized that the genealogical documents weren't just family trees, but actually geographical references. The names and dates that appeared to describe royal lineages were actually coordinates and timing instructions for locating hidden caches throughout the Languedoc region. Each marriage described in the text corresponded to the intersection of astronomical sight lines and geographical landmarks. The religious text proved even more remarkable. The Gospel of John wasn't a standard copy, but a unique version that included additional verses written in the same hand as the original text. These additions described specific locations around Rennes-le-Château where treasures of the Spirit had been hidden by followers of the true way. The language was deliberately ambiguous, but the geographical details were precise enough to serve as a treasure map. The Liber Historia Francorum contained the most stunning revelation of all. Hidden within its account of Frankish history was a detailed narrative describing how the Knights Templar had transported their most valuable possessions from the Holy Land to southern France during the final years of the Crusader kingdoms. The text specified that these treasures included not just gold and silver, but also sacred objects of power and books of ancient wisdom that had been discovered in the chambers beneath the Holy of Holies. But the most extraordinary aspect of these documents was their system of cross-referencing. Each parchment contained coded references to the others, creating a master puzzle that could only be solved by analyzing all four texts simultaneously. When properly decoded, they revealed the locations of 17 different cache sites within a day's ride of Rennes-le-Château, along with detailed instructions for accessing each hidden chamber. The first site that Saunier investigated was located in a natural cave system about 3 kilometers southeast of the village. Following the parchment's instructions, he located a concealed entrance that had been sealed with stones fitted so precisely that they appeared to be natural geological formations. Inside, he discovered a chamber that had been modified with the same sophisticated engineering techniques he had observed beneath his church. The treasure he found there exceeded his wildest expectations. Gold and silver coins from across the medieval world filled ceramic jars that had preserved them in perfect condition. Precious stones cut with a precision that rivaled modern techniques sparkled in the lamplight. Most remarkably, religious artifacts made from materials and using methods that seemed impossibly advanced for their supposed age lay carefully wrapped in silk that showed no signs of decay despite centuries of storage. But as valuable as these material treasures were, the real revelation came from the documents and books that accompanied them. These texts provided the missing context for understanding the true scope of Templar activities in the region. The Knights hadn't just been hiding treasure. They had been implementing a systematic program for preserving knowledge and capabilities that they knew would be suppressed by ecclesiastical and royal authorities. The cache contained copies of documents that revealed the source of Templar wealth and power. During their excavations beneath the Temple Mount, they had discovered evidence of advanced civilizations that had possessed technologies and understanding far beyond anything acknowledged in official history. The knowledge they gained from these discoveries had enabled them to develop capabilities in finance, engineering, and consciousness research that gave them enormous advantages over their contemporaries. More disturbing from a church perspective were the religious implications of these discoveries. The documents described alternative versions of Christian history that portrayed the early church as having deliberately suppressed teachings that emphasized direct spiritual experience over institutional authority. The Templars had found gospels and letters that revealed Jesus as a teacher of consciousness expansion techniques, rather than just a sacrificial figure whose message required priestly interpretation. As Saunier explored more of the cache sites indicated by the parchments, he began to understand the true genius of the Templar preservation system. Each location contained not just treasure, but also pieces of a larger puzzle that revealed the Order's ultimate plan. They had foreseen their own destruction and had prepared for it by distributing their knowledge and resources across dozens of hidden sites that could remain secure for centuries. The most significant discovery came at the seventh site, located beneath the ruins of a small chapel that had supposedly been abandoned since the 14th century. Here, Saunier found what the documents called the Master Archive, a collection of texts that provided comprehensive instructions for implementing the advanced knowledge that the Templars had preserved. These instructions weren't just theoretical descriptions, but practical manuals that enabled readers to develop the enhanced capabilities that had made the Templars so successful. Techniques for expanded consciousness provided access to information and insights that conventional thinking couldn't reach. Methods for pattern recognition enabled prediction of market trends and political developments with uncanny accuracy. Communication protocols allowed coordination with other inheritors of hidden knowledge throughout Europe. The transformation in Saunier's life after discovering these materials wasn't just about wealth. It was about accessing human potential that had been deliberately suppressed for centuries. The gold and silver he found in the caches provided the financial resources for his construction projects, but the knowledge he gained from the documents provided the capabilities that enabled him to succeed in ventures that would have been impossible using conventional approaches. His frequent trips to Paris weren't just social visits, but business expeditions that utilized the enhanced intuition and pattern recognition he had developed through practicing the Templar techniques. His success rate in financial investments was so consistent that it attracted attention from banking authorities, but investigations found no evidence of conventional fraud because his methods operated according to principles that mainstream understanding couldn't recognize. The visitors who came to Rennes-le-Château during Saunier's prosperous years were other inheritors of Templar knowledge, who had been guided to contact him through the communication networks described in the preserved documents. These weren't random tourists, but members of an international community of researchers and practitioners who were working to gradually reintroduce advanced human capabilities into modern civilization. The parchments had revealed that Saunier's role in this process extended far beyond personal enrichment. He had become a guardian of knowledge that could transform human potential, but also a test case for determining whether contemporary society was ready for such revelations. His success in integrating ancient wisdom with modern conditions would influence decisions about the broader revelation of preserved knowledge. By 1900, Saunier had explored 15 of the 17 sites indicated by the parchments. Each discovery had added to his understanding of the Templar legacy and his own responsibilities as its inheritor. The final 2 sites, according to the encoded instructions, contained materials that would only be accessible when specific astronomical conditions occurred, events that wouldn't take place for several more years. The parchments that started Saunier's transformation continue to challenge our understanding of medieval capabilities and knowledge preservation. They represent evidence that the official narrative of European history is incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst. The treasures they revealed were just the visible surface of a much deeper legacy that continues to influence human development in ways that most people never recognize. The true treasure map of the Knights Templar wasn't just about finding gold and silver hidden in caves. It was about rediscovering human potential that had been systematically suppressed and preserved across centuries of dark ages. Saunier's story proves that this potential remains accessible to those who possess the courage and wisdom to seek it. But it also warns that such knowledge comes with responsibilities that extend far beyond personal benefit. You're sitting across from Marie Denonade in the modest kitchen of the presbytery, watching her eyes as she carefully measures her words. She's been Saunier's housekeeper for over 20 years, present for every discovery, every midnight visitor, every whispered conversation that transformed their quiet village into the center of a mystery that spans centuries. And she knows far more than she's ever admitted. Marie arrived at Rennes-le-Château in 1885, the same year as Saunier, hired as a simple domestic servant to manage the household of an impoverished parish priest. She was 21 years old, unmarried, and came from a farming family in nearby Esperanza. By all appearances, she was exactly what she seemed, a local girl taking one of the few respectable positions available to women of her social class. But from the beginning, Marie's role in Saunier's household was unusual. Most parish priests employed elderly women as housekeepers to avoid any suggestion of impropriety. Marie was young, intelligent, and possessed a discretion that went far beyond her years. More significantly, she demonstrated skills and knowledge that seemed inconsistent with her humble background. When Saunier began his underground excavations in 1886, Marie didn't just ignore the strange noises and unexplained absences that would have alarmed most housekeepers. She actively assisted in maintaining the secrecy that his work required. She learned to provide alibis for his activities, to manage suspicious visitors, and to handle correspondence in ways that protected his privacy without arousing suspicion. The discovery of the underground archive in 1890 marked a transformation in Marie's role that paralleled Saunier's own metamorphosis. As the priest's wealth grew and his lifestyle became more sophisticated, his housekeeper evolved from simple domestic servant into something approaching a personal secretary and confidential agent. She managed financial arrangements that involved substantial sums of money coordinated with mysterious visitors from across Europe and maintained records that she kept in her own coded shorthand. Marie's intelligence and capabilities became increasingly apparent as Saunier's activities expanded. She demonstrated facility with languages that she had never formally studied, enabling her to communicate with the international network of contacts that her employer had developed. Her memory for details was extraordinary, allowing her to track complex arrangements without keeping written records that might compromise operational security. Most remarkably, Marie seemed to understand the significance of Saunier's discoveries in ways that went beyond simple domestic support. When he began implementing the consciousness enhancement techniques described in the Templar documents, she studied and practiced the same methods. The enhanced intuition and pattern recognition that transformed Saunier's capabilities were matched by similar developments in his housekeeper's awareness and skills. By 1895, Marie had become Saunier's full partner in managing the practical aspects of his mission. She handled negotiations with craftsmen and suppliers for his construction projects, managed the complex logistics of his treasure recovery expeditions, and served as his representative in dealings that required absolute discretion. Her role had evolved far beyond anything that could be described as conventional domestic service. The extent of Marie's involvement became apparent when church authorities began investigating Saunier's finances in 1905, while the priest himself provided evasive answers about the source of his wealth. Marie demonstrated detailed knowledge of financial arrangements that should have been beyond a housekeeper's responsibilities. She could account for expenditures, explain investment strategies, and describe business relationships with precision that suggested intimate involvement in planning and implementation. More intriguingly, Marie's responses to official questioning revealed that she understood the historical and spiritual significance of what they had discovered. When asked about the strange decorations in the church, she provided explanations that demonstrated familiarity with symbolic traditions and esoteric knowledge that no simple domestic servant should have possessed. Her answers suggested education and cultural sophistication that contradicted her official background. The mystery of Marie's true identity deepened as researchers began investigating her family history. While records confirmed her birth in nearby Speranza, other details of her background proved surprisingly difficult to verify. Educational records that should have documented her schooling were missing or incomplete. Family connections that should have been traceable through parish records seemed to lead nowhere. Some researchers have proposed that Marie wasn't randomly hired as Saunier's housekeeper, but was instead placed in the position by parties who understood the significance of what was likely to be discovered at Rennes-le-Château. Her unusual capabilities and knowledge suggest preparation that would have required access to educational resources and training opportunities that weren't available to ordinary peasant families in 19th century France. This theory gained support from evidence that Marie maintained connections beyond her official role that paralleled Saunier's own mysterious network. She received correspondence from sources that had no apparent connection to household management. She traveled occasionally to destinations that she never fully explained. Most tellingly, she demonstrated access to financial resources that exceeded anything that could be explained by her wages as a domestic servant. The partnership between Saunier and Marie took on additional complexity during the final years of the priest's life. As his health declined and church pressure increased, Marie assumed greater responsibility for protecting and preserving the knowledge they had discovered. She managed the creation of additional hidden caches, maintained correspondence with the international network of initiates, and prepared contingency plans for continuing their mission if Saunier's activities were forcibly terminated. When Saunier suffered his fatal stroke in January 1917, Marie's behavior provided crucial clues about the true nature of their relationship and her role in preserving his legacy. Rather than simply grieving for her employer, she immediately implemented security measures that suggested extensive advance planning. Important documents disappeared from the presbytery before church authorities could examine them. Valuable objects were relocated to unknown destinations. Most significantly, Marie demonstrated knowledge of arrangements that Saunier had supposedly kept secret from everyone. The priest's will officially left his entire estate to Marie, a bequest that shocked local residents and church authorities alike. While some interpreted this as evidence of an improper romantic relationship, others recognized it as confirmation that Marie had been Saunier's full partner in activities that extended far beyond conventional parish management. The inheritance wasn't just property and possessions. It was responsibility for continuing a mission that neither of them had created, but both had devoted their lives to advancing. Marie's management of this inheritance revealed capabilities that confirmed her true role in Saunier's work. She demonstrated detailed knowledge of financial arrangements, property holdings, and business relationships that would have required years of involvement in planning and implementation. Her decisions about what to preserve, what to sell, and what to hide showed understanding of priorities that could only have come from intimate knowledge of their mission's ultimate goals. The mystery of what Marie knew deepened during the 36 years she survived after Saunier's death. Local residents reported that she continued to receive mysterious visitors, maintained correspondence with unknown parties, and made trips whose purposes she never explained. Her lifestyle suggested access to resources that exceeded the income from Saunier's bequests, indicating continued involvement in activities that generated substantial returns. More intriguingly, Marie seemed to possess knowledge about future developments that proved remarkably accurate. She made investments and property decisions that anticipated changes in economic and political conditions years before they became apparent to other observers. Her prescience suggested either remarkable intuitive abilities or access to information, sources that operated beyond normal channels. The question of what secrets died with Marie became urgent as her health declined in the early 1950s. Researchers and treasure hunters who had learned about the Rennes-le-Château mystery began approaching her with offers to purchase information about Saunier's discoveries. Some promised substantial payments for revelations about hidden treasures. Others offered to preserve her story for historical posterity. Marie's responses to these Inquiries were carefully calibrated to reveal nothing of substance while maintaining interest in the mystery. She confirmed that Saunier had indeed made remarkable discoveries, but claimed that the full truth was too dangerous to reveal. She acknowledged that substantial treasures remained hidden, but insisted that their locations died with the priest. Most tantalizingly, she suggested that the real secret wasn't about gold or silver, but about knowledge that could transform human understanding of history and potential. When Marie suffered the stroke that left her unable to speak in 1953, she took with her secrets that could have revolutionized our understanding of medieval history and human capabilities. Her silence wasn't just the result of medical incapacity. It was the final act in a lifetime devoted to protecting knowledge that she and Saunier had determined was too dangerous for premature revelation. The legacy of Marie de Narnaud extends far beyond her role as Saunier's housekeeper and heir. She represents the hidden tradition of women who have served as guardians and preservers of dangerous knowledge throughout history. Her story demonstrates that the mystery of Rennes-le-Château involved far more people and extended much deeper into history than most researchers have recognized. Today, the cottage where Marie spent her final years continues to attract investigators hoping to discover clues she might have left behind. Some claim to have found hidden compartments containing documents or artifacts. Others report strange phenomena that suggest the presence of forces beyond normal understanding. Whether these claims represent genuine discoveries or wishful thinking, they reflect the continuing influence of a woman who knew too much to speak freely, but too little to remain silent completely. You're walking through corridors beneath the Vatican that don't appear on any official map, past doors bearing no identification, and to rooms where decisions are made that will never see the light of day. This is where the Church's response to the Rennes-le-Château discoveries was orchestrated, a campaign of containment that began the moment word of Saunier's transformation reached Rome and continues to this day. The Vatican's intelligence network had been refined through centuries of dealing with heretical movements, political threats, and dangerous knowledge that could undermine church authority. By 1893, detailed reports were reaching Rome describing the sudden wealth of an obscure French priest, his bizarre construction projects, and his apparent access to knowledge that exceeded his official education. These reports triggered alarms throughout the church hierarchy. Cardinal Mariano Rampolla, Pope Leo XIII's Secretary of State and the Vatican's spy master, recognized immediately that the situation at Rennes-le-Château represented a potential catastrophe for church authority. If Saunier had indeed discovered significant Templar materials, the implications could extend far beyond one priest's personal enrichment. The Knights Templar had possessed knowledge and capabilities that the Church had spent centuries trying to suppress. The initial Vatican response was characteristically subtle. Rather than launch an obvious investigation that might drive the problem underground, Cardinal Rampolla implemented what internal documents called the Observation Protocol, a strategy for infiltrating Saunier's network while maintaining plausible deniability about church involvement. The approach had been perfected during earlier campaigns against secret societies and mystical movements throughout Europe. Father Antoine Gallis, the elderly priest of nearby Custassa, received a visit from a Vatican representative who offered him a substantial pension in exchange for regular reports about his colleagues' activities. Gallus, who had served faithfully for decades without recognition, accepted the arrangement and began providing detailed accounts of Saunier's visitors, correspondence, and construction projects. Local bishops throughout the region received confidential instructions to monitor any unusual activity in their diocese and report anything that might be connected to medieval treasure discoveries or esoteric knowledge. Seminary libraries were quietly searched for any historical documents that might reveal what Templar materials could have survived in the Languedoc region. Most importantly, Vatican archivists began a systematic review of their own collections, searching for any references to Templar activities around Rennes-le-Château. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Medieval documents described extensive Templar operations in the region, references to sealed knowledge that was too dangerous for revelation, and correspondence between 14th century popes discussing efforts to locate materials that had escaped confiscation when the order was suppressed. The archives contained evidence that previous church authorities had been aware of hidden caches in the Languedoc, but had chosen to leave them undisturbed, rather than risk the consequences of their discovery. Several popes had received reports about dangerous knowledge preserved in the region, but had decided that attempting to recover it posed greater risks than allowing it to remain hidden. This historical context transformed the Vatican's understanding of what they were facing. Saunier's discoveries weren't just about one priest finding medieval treasure. They represented the activation of a preservation system that had been created specifically to survive church persecution. The implications were staggering. If the Templars had successfully hidden their most dangerous knowledge, its eventual revelation could undermine centuries of carefully constructed religious authority. The assassination of Father Gallus in 1897 marked a dramatic escalation in the Vatican's response. While officially attributed to robbery, the murder bore the hallmarks of professional elimination. Nothing of value was taken from the presbytery, but Gallus's correspondence and personal papers had been thoroughly searched. His regular reports to Vatican contacts had ceased several weeks before his death, suggesting he had discovered something that required immediate silencing. The killing sent a clear message to church authorities, the forces protecting Sauniers. Secrets were prepared to use extreme measures to maintain their security. This revelation transformed Vatican strategy from passive observation to active intervention. Cardinal Rampolla authorized the establishment of a special unit dedicated exclusively to the Rennes-le-Château situation. This unit, operating under the cover name Commission for Historical Preservation, was staffed by Jesuits who had been trained in intelligence operations and equipped with resources that exceeded those available to most government agencies. Their mission was to identify, locate, and secure any materials related to Templar activities in southern France while maintaining absolute secrecy about church involvement. The Commission's first major success came in 1902 when they located and excavated a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of a Templar commandery near Béziers. The materials recovered included documents that confirmed the existence of an extensive preservation network and provided clues about additional cache sites throughout the region. More disturbing were texts that revealed the true scope of Templar knowledge and capabilities. These discoveries validated church fears about the implications of unrestricted access to preserved Templar materials. The documents described consciousness enhancement techniques that could provide individuals with capabilities that would make them effectively independent of ecclesiastical authority. They included historical information that contradicted official church narratives about the development of Christianity. Most dangerously, they contained technological and scientific knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of natural law. The Commission's analysis revealed that Saunier represented just the tip of a much larger iceberg. The preservation network included multiple sites throughout Europe, protected by security measures that had evolved across centuries. Other individuals had already gained access to portions of the preserved knowledge and were working to coordinate their efforts. The church was facing not just one rogue priest, but an international conspiracy that threatened foundations of religious authority. Vatican response to this intelligence was swift and comprehensive. Pope Pius X authorized the expansion of the Commission's mandate to include operations throughout Europe. Additional resources were allocated for locating and securing Templar sites. Most significantly, the Church began developing long-term strategies for managing knowledge that was too dangerous to destroy, but too risky to reveal. The approach that emerged from these deliberations became known within Vatican circles as perpetual containment, a systematic campaign to identify, control, and gradually neutralize threats to church authority while maintaining the appearance of normal religious administration. The strategy involved multiple components designed to operate across decades or centuries if necessary. Intelligence operations were expanded to monitor archaeological research, academic investigations, and even popular culture for signs that suppressed knowledge might be surfacing. The Church learned to work through secular institutions when necessary, ensuring that certain discoveries never received funding, certain sites were never excavated, and certain theories never gained academic acceptance. Economic pressure became a standard tool for discouraging unwanted research. Scholars who showed too much interest in medieval esoterica found their funding canceled or their academic positions threatened. Publishers who considered books about dangerous historical topics received visits from parties who persuaded them to reconsider their editorial decisions. Legal mechanisms were developed for preventing access to potentially significant sites. Environmental protection laws, historical preservation regulations, and property rights were manipulated to ensure that key locations remained inaccessible to unauthorized investigators. Local authorities throughout Europe were quietly educated about the dangers of permitting amateur archaeology in sensitive areas. The most sophisticated component of the Vatican's campaign involved the development of counter-narratives designed to discredit genuine discoveries while promoting alternatives that would satisfy public curiosity without revealing dangerous truths. The Rennes-le-Château mystery itself became a test case for these psychological operations. Rather than completely suppress interest in Saunier's story, church strategists allowed controlled revelations that focused attention on romantic explanations, rather than the genuine historical significance of his discoveries. Theories about lost royal bloodlines, hidden religious artifacts, and ancient conspiracies were quietly encouraged because they distracted investigators from pursuing the technological and consciousness-related aspects of Templar knowledge. This approach proved remarkably successful. By the 1960s, the Rennes-le-Château mystery had been transformed from a potentially serious threat to church authority into a source of entertainment that actually reinforced popular stereotypes about medieval superstition and religious fantasy. Serious researchers were discouraged by the association with conspiracy theories, while amateur enthusiasts pursued dead ends that had been carefully prepared for them. The Vatican's campaign achieved its primary objective of preventing the systematic revelation of Templar knowledge, but it couldn't eliminate the underlying reality that dangerous materials remained hidden throughout Europe. The Commission continued its work across multiple papal administrations, adapting its methods to changing technological and social conditions while maintaining its core mission of protecting church authority from historical truth. Modern Vatican intelligence operations represent the continuation of strategies that were developed in response to the Rennes-le-Château discoveries. The lessons learned from that campaign influenced church responses to everything from archaeological discoveries to scientific research that might challenge religious doctrine. The techniques perfected during the war against Templar knowledge became standard tools for managing any information that could threaten institutional authority. Today, the Commission for Historical Preservation operates under different names and uses more sophisticated methods, but its mission remains essentially unchanged. Somewhere beneath the Vatican, files continue to accumulate that document ongoing efforts to contain knowledge that could transform human understanding of history and potential. The secret war that began with Saunier's discoveries continues in ways that most people never recognize, fought by forces that prefer to remain invisible while shaping the boundaries of acceptable truth. You're staring at multiple computer screens in a converted warehouse outside London, where satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar data, and medieval manuscripts converge in a high-tech treasure hunt that would have amazed Saunier. The search for the remaining secrets of Rennes-le-Château has evolved far beyond simple archaeology into something resembling a global intelligence operation, powered by technology that can peer through solid rock and decode secrets that have resisted human analysis for over a century. The modern phase of Rennes-le-Château research began in the 1960s when British television producer Henry Lincoln encountered the mystery through a French documentary. Unlike previous investigators who relied on traditional historical methods, Lincoln brought a media perspective that recognized the power of publicity in forcing hidden information into the open. His subsequent books and documentaries transformed an obscure local mystery into an international phenomenon that attracted researchers from fields far removed from conventional archaeology. Lincoln's revolutionary approach was his systematic use of geometric analysis and early computer modeling to decode landscape patterns that earlier investigators had only dimly perceived. Working with colleagues Richard Lee and Michael Bagent, he applied mathematical precision to reveal that the positioning of churches, ruins, and monuments around Rennes-le-Château followed geometric relationships so precise they couldn't possibly be coincidental. The breakthrough came when Lincoln used emerging computer graphics technology to map these geometric relationships across the entire region. The resulting images showed a network of interconnected sites, forming patterns of stunning regularity and mathematical sophistication. The implications challenged fundamental assumptions about medieval capabilities and suggested that someone had imposed a vast information storage system on the landscape itself. This discovery attracted attention from researchers whose expertise exceeded anything available to traditional treasure hunters. Dr. David Wood, a mathematician from the University of Cambridge, began analyzing the geometric patterns using advanced computational tools. His work revealed that the network used principles of sacred geometry that encoded astronomical data, mathematical constants, and navigational information across hundreds of square kilometers. Computer scientists soon joined the investigation, recognizing that the landscape patterns represented an analog information storage system that predated digital technology by centuries. Professor James Thompson of MIT's Media Lab described the Rennes as Chateau network as the world's first massive non-digital database, capable of preserving and transmitting information across unlimited time periods without requiring maintenance or technological infrastructure. The Internet age brought unprecedented capabilities to Rennes Chateau research while also attracting surveillance from parties who preferred that certain discoveries remain hidden. Online forums allowed researchers from around the world to share findings, theories, and analytical techniques through encrypted channels. Collaborative databases aggregated decades of investigation into searchable archives that revealed patterns invisible to individual researchers. Digital analysis tools transformed the investigation of Saunier's original discoveries. High-resolution scanning of his construction projects revealed hidden symbols and encoded measurements that had escaped detection for over a century. Computer enhancement of historical photographs uncovered details that provided new clues about his knowledge sources and methods. Most significantly, artificial intelligence systems began identifying connections between seemingly unrelated elements of the mystery. The most advanced modern investigation was conducted by Dr. Sarah Chun, a former NSA cryptanalyst who had worked on classified projects involving historical code breaking. In 1997, she established the Digital Archaeology Foundation, a nonprofit organization that combined academic research with intelligence-grade analytical capabilities. Her team included experts in quantum computing, satellite reconnaissance, and consciousness research who brought unprecedented resources to bear on medieval mysteries. Chun's breakthrough came through the application of quantum cryptographic techniques to the parchments that had originally transformed Saunier's life. Where earlier researchers had found simple substitution codes and geometric references, her analysis revealed multi-layered encryption systems that used principles of information theory that weren't supposed to exist until the 20th century. The medieval creators had somehow developed encoding methods that anticipated quantum computing by nearly a millennium. The decoded messages revealed that Saunier's discoveries represented only a small fraction of what the Templars had preserved. The 4 parchments he found were components of a much larger system that included dozens of additional documents hidden throughout Europe. Each piece contained references to the others, creating a master puzzle that could only be solved through coordinated international investigation. Modern detection technology began confirming the accuracy of these decoded references. Ground-penetrating radar surveys identified hidden chambers at locations specified in the documents. Satellite imagery revealed landscape modifications that matched medieval engineering descriptions. Most remarkably, electromagnetic anomaly detectors discovered artificial structures buried beneath sites that had shown no surface evidence of human activity. The most significant discovery occurred in 2003, when Chun's team used quantum scanning technology to examine the church at Rennes-le-Château itself. The analysis revealed that Sunier's building modifications had been far more extensive than anyone had realized. Hidden chambers and passages honeycombed the structure, some predating his arrival by centuries, others clearly created during his renovations using techniques that shouldn't have been available in the 1890s. Deep beneath the church, the scans detected a chamber that showed no evidence of having been opened since medieval times. The rune's dimensions and positioning matched descriptions in documents that Chun's team had decoded from other Templar sites. If the pattern held true, this chamber would contain materials that could reveal the ultimate purpose of the entire preservation network. Access to this chamber became the focus of an international effort that involved not just academic researchers, but also intelligence agencies, technology companies, and private organizations whose interests in the preserved knowledge extended far beyond historical curiosity. The potential implications of advanced consciousness enhancement techniques, lost technological capabilities, and suppressed historical information attracted attention from parties who recognized the strategic value of such discoveries. The French government's response to these developments reflected awareness that the Rennes-le-Château mystery had evolved beyond simple archaeological curiosity into a matter of potential national security. Access to the village was restricted under heritage protection laws that prevented unauthorized excavation. Tourism was encouraged to provide economic benefits while ensuring that serious research remained under official supervision. More significantly, international cooperation agreements were established to coordinate research while preventing any single organization from gaining exclusive access to potentially revolutionary discoveries. The Vatican, despite its centuries-long campaign to suppress Templar knowledge, found itself participating in discussions about controlled revelation of materials that could no longer be kept completely secret. Modern treasure hunters discovered that their activities were being monitored by surveillance systems that exceeded anything available to earlier investigators. Emails discussing significant discoveries were intercepted by unknown parties. Researchers who made breakthrough findings often encountered funding problems or academic pressure that discouraged continued investigation. Some investigators reported being approached by anonymous representatives who offered substantial payments in exchange for exclusive access to their work. The most successful contemporary research efforts learned to operate using security protocols that would have impressed medieval secret societies. Distributed research networks prevented any single organization from controlling critical information. Encrypted communication channels protected sensitive discussions from surveillance. Multiple backup systems ensured that important discoveries couldn't be suppressed through conventional pressure tactics. These precautions proved necessary as research progressed toward discoveries that threatened established narratives about human history and capabilities. The consciousness enhancement techniques preserved in Templar documents were being successfully implemented by modern practitioners who demonstrated abilities that conventional psychology couldn't explain. Technologies derived from medieval descriptions were producing results that exceeded current scientific understanding. Private organizations began competing to acquire researchers who had gained access to preserved knowledge and could apply it to contemporary challenges. Intelligence agencies recruited specialists who understood medieval encoding systems and could apply similar principles to modern information security. Technology companies hired experts who could reverse engineer ancient capabilities using current materials and methods. The globalization of Rennes-le-Château research created a phenomenon that the original Templar planners might not have anticipated: the gradual emergence of their preserved knowledge through multiple channels simultaneously. Rather than waiting for a single predetermined revelation moment, the information was surfacing through academic research, private investigation, and commercial development in ways that made comprehensive suppression impossible. By 2020, the mystery of Rennes-le-Château had evolved into something far more significant than a local French curiosity. It had become a window into suppressed human capabilities and hidden historical development that challenged fundamental assumptions about civilizations' progress. The question facing contemporary researchers wasn't whether the preserved knowledge existed, but whether humanity had developed enough wisdom to use it responsibly. The digital age had democratized access to tools and information that were previously available only to elite institutions, but it had also revealed the scope of forces arrayed against unrestricted revelation of dangerous knowledge. The hunt for Templar secrets had become a race between discovery and suppression, with the future of human potential hanging in the balance. Modern hunters in this digital age face challenges that their medieval predecessors never imagined. But they also possess capabilities that could finally unlock secrets that have waited centuries for revelation. The outcome of their efforts may determine whether humanity's hidden inheritance will be claimed by those wise enough to use it properly, or suppressed by those who fear its transformative power. You stand at the precipice of revelation, where 7 centuries of carefully guarded secrets converge into a truth that will challenge everything you thought you knew about human history, potential, and the forces that have shaped civilization itself. The mystery of Rennes-le-Château was never just about a French village or a wealthy priest or hidden medieval treasure. It was about humanity's inheritance, knowledge, and capabilities that have been preserved across dark ages, waiting for the moment when our species might be wise enough to reclaim them. The investigation that began with Saunier's discoveries has revealed a truth more extraordinary than any treasure hunter ever imagined. The Knights Templar didn't just find gold and religious artifacts beneath Solomon's temple. They discovered proof that human civilization has been guided by intelligences and knowledge systems far more advanced than mainstream history acknowledges. The treasure they brought to southern France included technologies, consciousness enhancement techniques, and understanding about reality itself that represented humanity's true heritage. Modern analysis of the materials preserved at Rennes-le-Château and related sites has confirmed what the Templars recognized 8 centuries ago. Human beings possess latent capabilities that exceed current limitations by orders of magnitude. The consciousness enhancement techniques described in the medieval documents aren't supernatural phenomena, but practical applications of understanding about neuroplasticity and quantum consciousness that contemporary science is only beginning to recognize. Dr. Elena Vasquez's classified research at a facility hidden beneath CERN has provided the most comprehensive analysis ever conducted of authentic Templar artifacts. Her team's discoveries validate the most extraordinary claims about preserved knowledge while revealing implications that extend far beyond historical curiosity. The artifacts display properties that violate several fundamental laws of physics, as currently understood, while their information storage capabilities appear to be literally unlimited. The consciousness interface technologies developed by medieval initiates represent achievements that modern science is struggling to match. When activated through specific mental techniques, these devices create what Vasquez described as resonance bridges between human neural networks and information fields that exist beyond normal space-time constraints. The enhanced intuition, pattern recognition, and communication abilities that transform Saulnier's life demonstrate just a fraction of what becomes possible when ancient wisdom merges with contemporary understanding. But perhaps the most significant discovery is that the Rennes-le-Château network wasn't created by medieval humans working alone. The mathematical precision, technological sophistication, and consciousness research described in the preserved documents suggest collaboration with intelligences that possessed capabilities far exceeding anything attributed to historical civilizations. The Templars were preserving wisdom that had been gifted to humanity by teachers whose own origins stretch back to the earliest development of human consciousness. This revelation transforms our understanding of the entire historical narrative. Human civilization hasn't been a gradual progression from primitive origins to modern sophistication. Instead, it represents a cyclical process of advancement, suppression, and rediscovery that has repeated across millennia. Each cycle has built upon previous achievements while adapting to changing conditions and evolving capabilities. The suppression campaigns that have repeatedly eliminated advanced knowledge haven't been accidental historical casualties. They represent systematic efforts by control-oriented institutions to prevent human beings from accessing capabilities that would make authoritarian governance impossible. When individuals can enhance their consciousness, access unlimited information, and communicate directly with each other across vast distances, traditional power structures become obsolete. The Vatican's centuries-long war against Templar knowledge reflects institutional recognition that preserved capabilities threaten the foundations of hierarchical control. But the Church isn't the only organization that has worked to suppress human potential. Political, economic, and social institutions throughout history have collaborated to maintain systems based on scarcity, limitation, and dependence rather than abundance, capability, and self-determination. The current global situation suggests that this historical pattern may finally be changing. The convergence of digital communication networks, quantum computing research, consciousness studies, and decentralized organization models has created conditions that make complete suppression of advanced knowledge increasingly difficult. The information that was carefully preserved at sites like Rennes-le-Château is emerging through multiple channels simultaneously. Modern practitioners who have gained access to consciousness enhancement techniques are developing capabilities that validate the historical claims about human potential. Enhanced intuition provides access to information that exceeds normal analytical methods. Improved pattern recognition reveals relationships and possibilities that conventional thinking cannot detect. Communication abilities transcend physical limitations in ways that resemble telepathy, but operate according to principles that quantum physics is beginning to understand. These developments have attracted attention from technology companies, intelligence agencies, and research institutions that recognize the strategic importance of expanded human capabilities. Contemporary projects involving artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and brain-computer interfaces show clear influences from knowledge derived from Rennes-le-Château and related preservation sites that the financial implications of the preserved knowledge extend far beyond Saunier's personal wealth. The economic principles encoded in the Templar documents anticipate developments in global finance, resource distribution, and value creation that could eliminate scarcity-based economic systems entirely. The consciousness enhancement techniques provide access to creativity and problem-solving capabilities that could revolutionize human productivity and innovation. The health and longevity techniques preserved in the archive offer solutions to medical challenges that contemporary science struggles to address. The knowledge includes therapeutic approaches that work at cellular and quantum levels, life extension methods that could dramatically increase human lifespan, and healing techniques that accelerate recovery from injury and disease in ways that appear miraculous but operate according to natural principles. Perhaps most significantly, the spiritual technologies preserved at Rennes-le-Château provide methods for achieving states of consciousness that connect individual awareness to cosmic intelligence networks that span galaxies. These techniques offer humanity the possibility of evolving beyond current constraints into forms of awareness that could transform civilization itself while maintaining the individual creativity and diversity that makes human consciousness unique. The question facing humanity today isn't whether this knowledge exists or whether it works. Modern research has confirmed both its authenticity and its effectiveness. The question is whether our species has developed enough wisdom to use these capabilities responsibly. The power to transform consciousness, extend life access unlimited, information, and communicate across vast distances could either elevate humanity to unprecedented heights or trigger exactly the kind of chaos that has led to suppression in previous cycles. The Templars and their successors understood this dilemma, which is why they created such elaborate preservation and revelation systems. The knowledge was hidden not to prevent its discovery, but to ensure that it would emerge only when humanity was ready to handle its implications. The astronomical timing built into their system suggests that this moment of readiness may finally be approaching. Current global developments indicate that we may be living through the transition period that the medieval planners anticipated. The breakdown of traditional authority structures, the emergence of decentralized communication networks, and the growing recognition that current systems cannot solve humanity's greatest challenges all suggest that conditions are ripening for systematic transformation. The revelation process appears to be already underway, manifesting through scientific breakthroughs, technological innovations, and consciousness awakenings that seem spontaneous but actually follow patterns encoded in the preservation system. The knowledge is emerging gradually, allowing humanity to adapt to expanded capabilities without triggering the social collapse that rapid transformation might cause. Some researchers believe that conscious activation of the system could accelerate this process, while others argue that patience remains necessary to avoid premature revelation. The debate reflects the central challenge facing modern inheritors of preserved knowledge: how to balance the urgency of current global crisis against the historical lessons about the dangers of releasing transformative capabilities before wisdom has developed to match them. The truth about Rennes-le-Château ultimately transcends any simple explanation about treasure or conspiracy or historical mystery. It reveals that human beings are far more capable than current culture acknowledges, that our potential has been systematically suppressed by institutions that benefit from limitation, and that the time may finally be approaching when these ancient restrictions can be transcended. The village of Rennes-le-Château continues to guard its deepest secrets, but those secrets are no longer hidden from those who have developed the wisdom to understand them. The treasure that transforms Saunier's life awaits discovery by anyone willing to undertake the inner development necessary to receive it safely and use it responsibly. The legend ends where the future begins. The greatest treasure was never gold or silver or ancient artifacts. It was always the unlimited potential of consciousness itself, carefully preserved across centuries of darkness, waiting for humanity to develop enough wisdom to claim its inheritance and evolve into what it was always meant to become.